Many years ago, there was a tailor. He was a very nice tailor and everybody liked him, but he didn't make much money because the money he got, he shared with his friends or anybody else in need. And one time he had made a lovely garment for a very wealthy man and was paid quite well. And friends convinced him to use his money on himself. So he bought a beautiful piece of fabric and he sewed a jacket. And it was a lovely jacket. And he wore it and he wore it and he wore it year after year. And he wore it so much that he finally wore it out. And he was sad, but he looked at his jacket and he thought, there's some, I could do something with it. So he snipped a little there, he cut a little there, and he came up and he made a jacket. And it was a lovely jacket. He wore it a lot. He wore it and he wore it and he finally wore it out. But he looked and he thought, you know, there's still some good fabric there. Well, I'll cut a little here, snip a little there. And he worked and he worked. And finally, he made a vest. And the vest was a lovely vest with beautiful material. And his friends liked it, he liked it. And he wore it and he wore it and he wore it. And finally, he wore it out. He looked at the vest and he thought, oh, I think I can do something with it. So he snipped a little here, he cut a little there, he sewed and he sewed. And finally, after much work, he made himself a hat. And it was a nice hat, a lovely hat. And he enjoyed it, his friends enjoyed it. And he wore his hat and he wore his hat and he wore it until finally he wore it out. But he looked and he thought, oh, I sure I can do something with it. There's not much material, but he cut a little there, he snipped a little there, and he worked and he worked and he worked. And as he was working, he thought, oh, I'm going to create something else. And he did, and he created a little tie. He wore the tie and he wore the tie, and it was lovely. But finally, he wore it out. So that, oh, I just hate to throw that fabric away. It was so special. So he snipped a little here, cut a little there, worked and worked, and he didn't have much. But finally, he worked hard. He had enough for a button. And he put the button on, and he wore the button, and he wore the button. And finally, although he really loved the fabric, the button wore out. So he thought, what could I do? He snipped a little here, snipped a little there, got out his pen and paper, and he told a story. He made a story out of his fabric, and he told me the story, and now I'm telling it to you so it will last. Thank you.